Yesterday, nurses rejected the government's pay rise offer of 5.5%. You said the decision was foreseeable. What did you mean by that?
Because the Labour government has lost control of the independent public sector pay process. The advice I received, and I've no reason to believe that the Health Secretary would have received any different advice, but there was clear advice I received from officials when I was working not just with nurses but across the board, was that if the ramifications of giving one part of the health workforce an inflation-busting pay rise, as they did over the summer with junior or resident doctors, will have an impact across the workforce, including for nurses. And so is it any wonder that having given this inflation-busting pay rise with no reform, no productivity improvements for junior doctors in the summer, that nurses and other healthcare professionals are now asking why they are not valued in the same way by this government?
But your government didn't handle the nurses very well either, did you?
Well, when I was Secretary of State, I was absolutely determined to ensure that we did give nurses a fair deal, and that included, by the way, working conditions. So I introduced improved working conditions for junior doctors, and I was working on improving working conditions for nurses with the Chief Executive of NHS England as well. But I took the step, I was so determined to do this, that I took the step of going to give evidence in person at the pay review body, because I wanted to put in context the evidence that I had seen of nurses working incredibly hard, making sure that after a very tough few years with the pandemic and so on, that they were given a fair settlement. What has changed the narrative is that since that recommendation has been given to the government and they've accepted it, they've then given an inflation-busting pay rise to junior doctors. And so I suspect that is why nurses are now saying, well, hang on, what if 22% over 2 years is good enough for junior doctors? Why is it not good enough for us as nurses?
How much would you be giving to them?
Well, it would have been part of the process. And this is why when, during the election campaign, Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting were saying, oh, roll up your sleeves and get round the table with the junior doctors. These negotiations are incredibly complex. And as I say, the advice I was getting from officials was that whatever I do with junior doctors will have an impact across the rest of the system, as we've now seen. But I wanted to ensure that nurses got that fair deal, and I wanted to have a consistency of approach across pay deals, so that with, for example, consultants, I made sure that as part of the deal that I reached with them, we were rewarding skills and experience. We were trying to improve productivity. We were also getting rid of some of the gender pay gap, because female consultants in particular were suffering because of the historic contract that was some 20 years old. I was trying to do all of that whilst reach a settlement that's fair for the staff, for patients and for the taxpayer. And I'm afraid this decision that the Health Secretary took over the summer is now beginning to have longer-term consequences across our health system.
You also claimed what's needed is action now, not words about the past. You would say that, wouldn't you, given I suppose the present government would say it's your fault?
Well, again, this is their decision to give this inflation-busting pay rise in the summer. And over the summer, judge a government by its actions. They've stopped building new hospitals. They have scrapped the NHS's own productivity plan. We have GPs entering industrial action, and now a potential dispute with hundreds of thousands of nurses and midwives. And there has to be a long-term strategy to this. Interestingly, only 9 months ago, when he was in opposition, Wes Streeting was saying to me, that you've paid consultants too much. This is a slap in the face for nurses. Yet when he's in government, he's given an even bigger pay rise to another section of the clinical community, and then is apparently taken aback that nurses are asking why they're not valued in the same way.
Kemi Badenoch has defended freebies as a way to spend time with the family. Do you agree? I
have not. I tend to spend free time with my family at home or in my constituency in the garden and so on. Freebies are not my thing, and indeed my register shows that. But what is interesting again is that the reason this has become so toxic for the Labour government is that, of course, before the election they were saying one thing. We now learn they were doing the exact opposite. And so I think it is that hypocrisy that people are very, very upset about.
But what do you think about what Kemi Badenoch has said?
Well, in fairness to Kemi, she hasn't gone out, as Keir Starmer has, claiming to be purer than pure. And so it is the hypocrisy of this that is really getting to people. And we've seen it in other aspects.
The party wasn't without hypocrisy.
Well, but we've seen it in other aspects with, for example, the health department. We have uncovered, they keep talking about transparency, but journalists have uncovered, we've tried to find out more about, for example, a former health secretary who has significant business interests in advising health businesses being allowed into the health department willy-nilly in a way that nobody else would be allowed, and there's no explanation for that. We've also, of course, seen the Chancellor herself appoint her personal donor into the civil service, and she only stopped that when the public fury was such that it became too difficult for her to justify.
Just been reading about David Davis, ex-cabinet minister. He's was raking in £3,000 an hour as an advisor to the manufacturer's JCB. He was a former Brexit secretary, and then he took £60,000 for 20 hours work each year from Lord Bamford, who was a major donor to the Leave campaign. But that doesn't smell not right, does it?
But political donations are perfectly permissible. I don't know the details of that, but in terms of the charge against the Labour government is that before the election they were saying clear it up. After the election, we have seen that they have been having.
He was in charge of taking us out of the European Union, and then the year after, he takes 60,000 quid from the guy that was campaigning to leave.
But it's a reputable, very reputable business. I think they're apples and pears, if I'm honest, Kay, because what we're seeing is that the Labour government has taken donations. That person who has paid for the Chancellor's clothes and the Deputy Prime Minister's clothes has a pass to Downing Street. We've seen that, well, again, interesting how that came about. They say that. We don't actually know that because they weren't transparent about the pass in the first place.
So you don't believe them?
Who knows? Well, I mean, the problem with this, they keep talking about transparency, but all of this information has been eked out of them because of investigative journalism. And so it isn't quite as transparent. I mean, the Chancellor says, oh, well, I took this donation. Nowhere did it detail that it was to purchase clothes for her personal wardrobe. And so it is this eking out of this information that I think is becoming increasingly a problem for the Labour government. And it's why we're saying, you know, you cannot say one thing in opposition and then do something else in government. It is extremely worrying that they're allowing their donors and so on to become, and party workers to become civil servants. That, again, is something that I certainly never saw as a minister or as a Secretary of State. And it is that hypocrisy that I think is really beginning to hurt them. And of course, all of this is going on whilst we know that pensioners are having their winter fuel payments stopped this winter.
Not all of them.
And we know that families are really worried about what will be coming up in this budget.
That's certainly true. I can't remember, you've told me before, I can't remember who you're backing.
Robert Jenrick.
What did you think about that sweater he had on over the weekend that said Hamas are terrorists?
I haven't seen it, but look, I think the.
I can show you.
As a fact, well, I mean, again, you'll remember the debates we had this time just a little under a year ago, and I certainly went on Question Time and other programmes asking the BBC why they were not describing Hamas as a terrorist organisation.
And we do within this organisation,
exactly right.
But, you know, yeah. I wouldn't wear a sweatshirt like that and walk around London.
No, well...
Would you?
No, but then, you know, I'm not going to be telling Rob which clothes he should be wearing. The problem arises where, as I say, cabinet ministers have people buying their clothes for them. That's a very different matter.
Yeah, but those that would be leader of your party having a smile on the face with Hamas are terrorists and posing for selfies that they put on Twitter.
So I think Rob...
It's not very adult.
Well, but Rob feels he has a very, very strong links with Judaism. His wife is Jewish, and he and many other Jewish people have grown increasingly worried about the... well, his wife is Jewish, have grown increasingly worried about how...
But that's incitement.
Our streets of... the streets of London, we have mass demonstrations.
Of course.
And
that's incitement, surely, no?
Worried about walking out in the streets. I hesitate, as a former criminal barrister, I'd always hesitate before analysing that and suggesting. I'm not sure it would be, Kay, but
so
as I say...
how would you describe it then?
It's a top, and it says Hamas are terrorists, and I think, actually, as people know, they are a terrorist organisation, and that is completely consistent with everything that Rob has said, and indeed I've said since October the 7th. we have got to, you know, the future of Palestine and the future of Israel is to have a two-state solution and for this terrorist organisation to be eradicated from Palestine, because that is what we all, as peace-loving people, want to see, an immediate ceasefire. We want to see peace return to the Middle East.
I always enjoy jousting with a criminal barrister.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Mari's been listening. Hi, Mari. Thoughts? Morning.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, fascinating on many levels. Let's start at the beginning. So Victoria Atkins there talking about